This presentation is part of my Read 7271 class at the University of West Georgia. This class will complete my requirements for my Master's in Special Education, and I will be graduating this spring. First of all, my goal is to explain the learning theory of cognitive constructivism and how it plays into two different reading theories, bottom-up reading theory and top-down reading theory. I will then explain how those theories can be put into practice in the classroom setting and how technology can enhance the reading process. Jean Piaget had an extensive background in biology and had investigated natural adaptations, but he transferred this knowledge into the field of psychology and expounded on a learning theory called cognitivism. Piaget had an early fascination with mollusks, and he noticed how they changed the shape of their shells based on the movement of the water in which they were in. So this was the groundwork which led him to connect animal behavior to human behavior. Piaget had difficulty in reconciling his religious upbringing with science. He believed that God transcends the world but can also be found in the thoughts of a person. So it's through his studies that he accommodated his newfound beliefs with that of his previous schema. Well, what is schema? There are several formal definitions, but I will try to define it according to my own schema. I like to explain it as a way to organize information and the way that we make connections to the world around us. I have an example here of a teacher. When I think of the word teacher, I used to think of a lady who sits at a desk and takes attendance or puts grades in the grades book, or maybe someone who stands at the chalkboard and presents a lesson. But now that I am a teacher, I realize that my schema has definitely changed. A person's schema is developed through the process of what Piaget calls assimilation and accommodation. To take in, to believe, to understand, to comprehend, to absorb. I believe some stereotypes have been assimilated into our thinking. For example, I used to think that people with tattoos were long-haired men who wore black leather jackets and drove loud motorcycles. When I realized this wasn't true, I had to accommodate my thinking. It could be someone like me, a middle-class female, an urban middle school special ed teacher with a small pink rose to honor her husband. Yeah, two totally different images. Accommodation. A young child sees a flying object in the sky and told, "It's a bird." They see an airplane flying in the air but know that it's different. So they adapt their schema to know that it's an airplane and not a bird, even though both of them can fly. So when a person comes to what Piaget calls equilibrium, that just means that they've reached a balance in their way of thinking. I guess maybe that's why young children are always asking, why? But why? And they say old people are set in their ways. Piaget became employed at a boys' school in France, and it's interesting to know that Alfred Binet, who developed a popular intelligence test, was someone that supervised at this school. It was here that Piaget encountered the notion that children would answer questions wrong, but as they got older, the number of questions that they answered right increased. So Piaget is credited for his linear classification of cognitive development from infancy through adolescence. Let's look at those stages. Sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. And with the allowance of children with exceptionalities either low or high, a normal child will progress through each stage in exactly the same sequence. So there will never ever be a time where a child will skip one stage and come back to it later. In the sensory motor stage, this occurs from birth to age 2, and this is where children experience the world through their senses, the things they see, feel, hear, things they touch or taste. When a baby is hungry, It's instinctive for them to cry. You don't have to tell them, now when you get hungry, you cry and let me know. The baby really has no reasoning skills at this, that it has to wait until the bottle is warmed in order for it to eat. The pre-operational stage occurs between the ages of 2 and 7. It's when motor skills are developing. The child learns to associate names with objects. The child can pretend to be a superhero with a sword and a shield and a cape. Or a child may pretend to be a Barbie, going shopping with their other Barbie friends. Their world of imagination is purely from their own schema or point of view. Piaget believed that children's conversations provided valuable clues to understand what they were thinking about. In the concrete operational, this occurs between the ages of 7 to 12, and this is when children begin to think logically about concrete events. Thinking becomes less intrinsic, and there's a heightened awareness of external events. Although the child can solve problems in this stage, they are more concerned with factual evidence rather than the abstract. Then in the formal operational, this occurs between the ages of 12 and upward, and this is when abstract reasoning is developed. The child is able to reason, make logical assumptions and judgments, and is not just limited to simple things that they can see, observe, or circumstances that they experience. Components of the bottom-up model. It was made popular in the 1970s by Philip Goh. He was born in September of 1934 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he received his doctorate in psychology at the University of Minnesota in 1961. So there's no doubt that he was quite familiar with the work of Piaget, as they were both psychologists. And although he didn't coin the term, he's widely credited with a lot of study on psycholinguistics, or the process behind which a person acquires their language. Goh's philosophy of reading instruction aligns with Piaget, and he believed that children have to be taught the basics of language in order to have a foundation in which to build upon. Goh wrote a book, 1 Second of Reading, and he described reading as a sequential or a serial mental process. Early readers start out by identifying the individual sounds that the letter makes. Those letters form words. Words form sentences. The sentences are constructed into paragraphs. Paragraphs become whole text. And it is then that the reader can make meaning of what he or she is reading. LaBerge and Samuels also buy into the bottom-up literacy theory, but they added another layer called automaticity. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. This sentence uses every letter in the alphabet, but when reading the sentence, you didn't have to take time to individually sound out every letter. That would take forever. The words were familiar that reading just became automatic. Two of the greatest vanguards who took on the campaign of top-down or whole language approach in the 1970s and 80s were Kenneth Goodman and Frank Smith. Kenneth Goodman was a non-Orthodox Jew who believed that Jews must begin by personally accepting the fundamental beliefs and traditions of Judaism in some way, but then they are free to apply them operationally in ways that they find meaningful and satisfying. This coincides with the constructivist work of Piaget. Again, assimilation and accommodation. What makes sense today may need to be modified when new information or new encounters are experienced. Frank Smith was fascinated with the brain and its function. He began that, unmistakably, the brain is involved in the reading process, but there's not a certain area or section of the brain that's reserved exclusively for reading. It functions together as a whole, hence the whole language approach. Language is processed from the whole to the parts. It's like having a completed jigsaw puzzle and then taking it apart one piece at a time. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Whole pizza is better than just a slice. Predictions. The reader is able to predict what might happen next. Repetition in reading is focused on practicing phrases, sentences, or stories again and again until the text elements are internalized. Mistakes and miscues are often seen as positive indicators that a student is willing to take risk. While the goal of both theories is comprehension and fluency, bottom-up reading focuses on text, while top-down focuses on the reader. It's a print versus prediction kind of concept. So let's look at the meat and potatoes of this and why we need to learn about the reading theories and how they apply to the classroom. I learned in my inclusion class in teaching English language arts to my 8th graders. I like to orally pre-teach vocabulary because this gives the student not only a way to pronounce the word, but lets them know the meaning of the word when they come to it in their text. I like to give them opportunity to participate in discussion by asking open-ended questions instead of questions that just require a yes or no answer. I like to give them options to listen to an audio version while following along with the text. I've also even shown a movie along with the book that we were reading, because this can often be used as a compare-contrast activity that allows even the low-level readers a way to comprehend and give them a feeling of satisfaction when they are able to see the difference in the two. Repeated reading is just when a student repeats the same reading passage several times until they are able to make comprehension and to understand what they are reading. Simultaneous repeated reading is where the teacher and the student read together in unison. At one point, the teacher will take the lead voice, and then they will alternate, and the student will take the lead voice. Echo reading is where a student repeats what the teacher or the peer reader has just read. If the teacher reads a phrase, then the student just repeats that back in an echo or a parrot kind of format. I also like to incorporate different learning modalities, the kinesthetic, the visual, the auditory, the tactile. This is especially helpful with some of my autistic students who have sensory processing disorders, such as some are highly sensitive to loud noises, some like to feel things and touch things. So if I can provide an object in the book for them to touch and feel, it helps them make a connection with the text. I also like to encourage collaboration among students to provide opportunities for them to work in different groups, social configurations, and different settings. We not only stay in the classroom, sometimes we'll go to different parts of the building. At my school, we do lots of projects-based learning, and we incorporate strategies such as jigsaw, circle of friends, where each group member contributes. I like to give each group member a different colored token, and once they have contributed to the discussion or given their input, they put their token in the middle of the table. And this is an indicator to me of which students are participating and which students may need some extra support. We also use a critical friends group, and something that I would like to try is cross-age peer tutoring, if I could get my administration to buy into that. At Fisher Middle School, this program is offered in 90-minute or block-scheduled increments every other day. It includes whole group instruction, and then students are broken into 3 small rotating groups where they complete individualized modules. Students sometimes require small group instruction with the teacher, and some are allowed to read independently on their Lexile level. This computerized program has 6 different components or zones. They include vocabulary with videos, individualized student closed readings, fluency, which includes practice in spelling and reading, writing, which allows the student to craft an argumentative, a narrative, or an informative essay, and it provides progressively more complex comprehension activities. Once a certain level has been mastered, then the student can move on. The average expected Lexile growth for a student in this program for a year is approximately 75 to 100 point increase. This year we've had a 6th grader who's increased his Lexile from 438 in August to 776 in January. That's a Lexile growth of 338. I'm truly amazed by that. This is an expensive program, but it works really great for the students who want to buy into the program. System 44 is designed for students in grades 3 through 12 with a Lexile range of 130 to 450. System 44 is a computer-based program that focuses on phonics, 26 letters and 44 sounds, and comprehension or decoding. It's for your lower Lexiles, and it's reserved mostly for our special ed students and our English language learners. System 44 applies bottom-up instruction, as its foundation is phoneme awareness, sounding out letters and blends, and spelling supports. Online reading resource that can serve to supplement classroom instruction. The teacher can differentiate by assigning reading passages according to Lexile levels or making an audio version available to struggling readers. This program does not teach phonics, but rather focuses on reading comprehension, so it is a top-down reading model. The lessons are aligned to Common Core and all state standards. The teacher can assign lessons for students to practice drawing conclusions, stating the author's purpose, citing textual evidence, context clues, and I like that it offers readings to include other subjects like science and history. But the best thing about it, it's free. Quick Reads is an online instructional program that introduces vocabulary within the context in the first of 5 related reading passages, and then those same vocabulary words are repeated in the following text. It offers various pacing guides and benchmarks to assess comprehension. The Lexile level can be set low for your English language learners, your English as a second language learner, or it can be set high for your gifted and talented or your honor students. Another program that I have used is IXL.com, and it offers teachers the opportunity to use both bottom-up and top-down reading theories. A teacher can assign a lower level module where students work on identifying the first sound that a letter in a word makes. Some modules work on morphology and syllable recognition. Other grade level modules provide practice on matching the picture with the word. But it also offers the secondary teacher the opportunity to assign modules that focus on using vocabulary word within the context of a sentence, which the whole language promotes. Foundation is substandard. There's not much for the rest of the structure to rest upon. Just as any home is assembled, neither the foundation, bottom up, nor the roof, top down, are practical apart from each other without the rest of the building materials in between. I really don't think there's a one-size-fits-all to reading. Reading instruction has to be custom designed, so to speak, to fit the individual needs of each student, and not just copycat blueprints where every house in the subdivision looks the same. So what happens when our students come to us with substandard parts, so to speak? What if they come to us broken? Well, it's just like the house we live in. We don't tear down the whole thing and build a new one. We just repair what needs mending. So I feel in this course that I've been given the tools to construct a fluent reader. Now it's up to me to go start building. This slide is for my professor. I know that you can read it, and probably pretty fast, but I do hope you get a chuckle. Thank you, and I hope you've learned more about the reading process through this presentation.